All right, let's dive into one of the most transformative, well, most important periods in all of American history, the Civil Rights Movement. It's an incredible story of struggle, for sure, but it's really about something even bigger. It's about the fight to make a nation finally live up to its own founding promise.
And it all really starts right here, with these words. This foundational promise, all men are created equal, is literally woven into the fabric of the United States. It's this powerful idea, right? That every single person is born with an equal shot at life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
But here's the thing. For generations of Black Americans, this was just a promise. It wasn't a reality. And that's the central question we have to ask. Why? If a nation is founded on the idea of equality, how could that promise be so broken for so many people for so long? What created this massive, massive gap between the ideal of America and the reality on the ground?
So to get to the bottom of that, we've got to look at the system that was built specifically to deny that promise. We're talking about a system of legal, state-sanctioned segregation that completely defined life for millions of people.
And that system had a name, Jim Crow. Now, it's really important to get this straight. These weren't just, social customs or suggestions. These were actual laws, state and local statutes, mostly in the South, that were designed to separate Black and white people in pretty much every aspect of public life you can imagine. So how did they justify this? Well, the official line, the promise, was this idea of separate but equal. But the reality that everyone living it knew all too well, was that separate never ever meant equal. It always meant inferior and unequal for Black Americans, no question.
And this wasn't some abstract thing. It touched every single part of daily life. Think about it. It meant your kids went to underfunded, subpar schools. It meant separate, worse facilities everywhere, buses, restaurants, you name it. It meant being denied your fundamental right to vote because of things like poll taxes or impossible literacy tests. And hanging over all of it, every single day, was the constant, terrifying threat of racial violence.
Okay, so in the face of all this immense injustice, something incredible started to happen. A movement began to rise up. And it was a movement defined by two things: absolute, unbelievable courage and a really smart, strategic commitment to nonviolent protest.
And you can really see the momentum build, brick by brick, over about a decade. First, a huge victory in the courts in 1954. Brown v. Board of Education makes school segregation unconstitutional. Then, a year later, it moves to the streets when Rosa Parks' act of defiance sparks the Montgomery Bus Boycott. And then, in 1960, a new generation, college students, takes up the fight with the first sit-ins. You see how it's growing? Each step builds on the last, all leading up to the massive, monumental March on Washington in 1963. It was this strategic escalation, building pressure, creating momentum that was becoming, well, unstoppable. So this wasn't a fight on just one front, It was happening all over the place. It was being waged in the highest courtrooms in the land, on regular old city buses, and, this is so important, it was often being led by incredibly brave young people. I mean, just think about the Little Rock Nine. Teenagers who faced down an angry mob just for the right to go to school.
And speaking of that March on Washington, just look at this number, 250,000. Let that sink in for a second. That's how many people, Black, white, from all over the country, showed up in Washington, D.C. in 1963. It was this absolutely stunning, powerful display of unity, a demand for change that the nation just couldn't ignore anymore.
And of course, it was on that day, standing before that massive crowd, that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered one of the most iconic, most powerful speeches in all of history. He didn't just speak, he gave voice to the deepest hopes of the entire movement. And it wasn't just a dream for Black Americans, it was a dream for the very soul of the nation. So you have all this pressure building, the marches, the boycotts, the speeches. It was this immense moral force. But that's not enough, right? The next crucial step, the whole point, really, was to turn all that protest into actual policy, to change the law of the land. And that pressure worked. It led to two landmark, game-changing victories. First, you get the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This is the one that officially outlawed discrimination in public spaces and in employment. It was huge. And then, hot on its heels, comes the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which finally tore down all those discriminatory barriers like literacy tests that had kept Black Americans from voting for generations. You really can't overstate how profound this was. Together, these two laws didn't just, poke holes in Jim Crow. They took a sledgehammer to its entire legal foundation. They fundamentally, completely changed the rules of American society.
But okay, the impact didn't just stop when those laws were signed. Not even close. The legacy of the movement created a ripple effect that we can still see and feel today, not just in America, but all over the world.
I mean, the consequences were just vast. Suddenly, doors to education and jobs that had been slammed shut for generations were finally starting to open. But it went deeper than that. It forced the entire country to have a difficult, long overdue conversation about its own prejudices. And maybe most powerfully, it became the blueprint, the inspiration for so many other movements fighting for equality, for women, for immigrants, for the LGBTQ+ community, and more.
Because ultimately, that's what it comes down to. The civil rights movement wasn't just about politics. It was a moral battle. It was about holding up a mirror to the entire nation and challenging it, forcing it, to finally start living up to that founding promise we talked about. The goal was never just to change the laws. It was to change the nation's conscience.
Which leaves us with one final thought. Dr. King famously said that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. The work of this movement was all about bending that arc. And the thing is, the struggle for true equality, it continues. So it leaves us with a question for ourselves. How is that arc still being bent today? And what part do we all play in it?